So the tarot originates as a game called Tarochi, like word of mouth, not just historically documented, where it's rumored to have come from the either the Egyptians or the ancient Greco-Roman societies, or even as far ancient and as far east as India. Basically, and so the oldest tarot decks that we have are the Visconti Sforzora tarot decks, and there's 15 of them. And they come from a family that ruled Milan from 1277 to 1447. And now, probably the Sforzora Visconti deck that people think of is the one that is at the Pierpont Morgan Library and Museum. And so you can kind of see some images here. We've got the Empress over here. Then we've got the Popus. That card later becomes the High Priestess. So taking a closer look at the Empress here. So here's the Empress. She's inspired by the image of Maria Bianca Visconti herself. She's holding part of the shield of the House of Sforzora. Here's an image of the Popus. Now, the Popus would have referenced the legend of Pope Joan. All right, so Pope Joan, the legend goes, supposedly served as Pope from 855 to 857 AD. Now, historically, this time period overlaps the reigns of two other popes, but the rumor is that essentially she was a woman who disguised herself as a man, rose up through the ranks of the Catholic Church, and eventually became Pope. And then she got kind of found out when one day during a procession, she suddenly gave birth. Now I want to get into the Solabusca. All right, so Solabusca, you're gonna kind of see why this one is particularly important. So we start off with Visconti Sforzora as the first physical evidence that we have, the earliest one. But not too long after, the Solabusca deck comes around. And this is commissioned by the Busca Cerboni family in 1490. This is the earliest deck that has all 78 cards still intact that we can still see today, from historical and mythological figures for a lot of the illustrations. Eventually incorporated into the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the deck that like basically everybody knows. All right. And I'll be talking more about just like hermetic stuff as we go. All right, for this deck, we've got the King of Swords. This is supposed to represent Alexander the Great, the ruler of ancient Macedon from 336 to 323 BC, is the Queen of Discs. So Queen of Discs is supposed to represent Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. And so basically, if you're familiar with the tale of the Golden Apple and the Star of the Trojan War, a golden apple is thrown out amongst the goddesses in Greek tradition. Athena, the goddess of cunning and war. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and fertility. And Hera, the goddess of like the hearth and the home, all start kind of fighting over this apple. And Zeus doesn't want to make a decision because he doesn't want to get in the middle of it. This poor human Paris gets chosen to decide who gets the apple. And so the goddesses start bribing Paris. And so Athena's like, I will make you the best warrior ever. And you'll have, the strength of 10,000 soldiers or something. And then you've got Hera promising, large lands, a huge empire, right? And then you've got Aphrodite promising the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, Paris, he's interested in hooking up, so he chooses the most beautiful woman in the world. Well, the most beautiful woman in the world is married to a Greek king named Menelaus. So Paris and Aphrodite go and steal Helen away back to Troy, back to Paris's home. And King Menelaus gets pretty mad about this. And so he goes to his brother, King Agamemnon, says, hey, let's get all the different Greek kings together and nobility, and let's go attack Troy and get my Helen back. And that's what starts the Trojan War, which is part of the story of the Iliad. So Iliad's like, 9 years into the Trojan War, if you've ever read the Iliad. But anyway, she's gazing into the disc or coin as if she's lost in thought. The whole thing with Helen is she seems, even in the Iliad, she seems a little unaware of how her actions, how her leaving has sort of had these huge implications. She's just really kind of caught up in her own world, caught up in her own. We go in the Solabusca, you're going to start seeing why Solabusca is so important. All right, so we've got on the left here the Solabusca, Seven of Swords, and on the right here, the Rider-Waite, Seven of Swords. Automatically, you can kind of see some of the resemblance. And this is because when Pamela Coleman Smith, the artist who created the Rider-Waite Smith deck, so she did all the artwork for it. You can see her signature in the bottom right-hand corner of every Rider-Waite card. So down here, start circling it with the mouse. All right. We know she likely went to go see a display of the Solabusca deck prior to creating the cards. Again, now this is the 10 of Swords in Solabusca versus the 10 of Wands in the Rider-Waite Smith, but automatically you can see that the imagery is so similar. So there was, some disagreements here about swords versus wands between the two, but you can see that she definitely was inspired by this card from the Solabusca deck.